viewers. Mike Madge. I'm back with Sailjuice.com, and today we're very excited to have with us Gavin Colby. Gavin Colby is expert catamaran sailor. He's raced everything from Hobie 16s, won the Hobie 16 World twice, F18s. He's been twice runner-up at the F18 Worlds. The round Textile race, which is advertised as the world's largest catamaran race. He's won, I believe, once or is it twice, Gavin? Is it twice?
Just once.
One time.
Once in a second.
Been runner-up at a Tornado Worlds. So basically, anything on two hulls, this guy knows how to make the boat go fast. So thanks for joining us, Gavin. We appreciate you, you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So maybe you could just start us off, your background, how you got into sailing, what type of boats you graduated from.
Oh, look, you know, I started sailing early teens, obviously, 12, 13 sort of thing. And it was, you know, a little boat here in Western Australia. And then not long after that, you know, I was sort of pulled under the wing, let's say, of, you know, Hobie Cat and Steve Fields. Obviously, he's still involved with Hobie Cat now. And he was, you know, heavily suggested that I sail a boat that's an international class. So off I went on a Hobie 16. Sailed the Hobie 16, obviously pretty extensively. And, you know, I did okay here in Australia and, you know, had a few worlds and things. But I was lucky enough, you know, in 98 to meet John Dinsdale and the crew from Hobie Cat Europe. And obviously after that, you know, I got offered a job in Europe and off I went to Europe and, you know, F18 and the rest is history. So that's how it all started, basically. Yeah. But I was just really, you know, was sort of told in no uncertain terms, basically, to sail an international class. And the Hobie 16 was easily the most popular in WA at the time. And you know, it was accessible and cheap and fun and, you know, all those sorts of things. And obviously back then nothing had spinnakers on it or anything like that. So the Hobie 16 was a natural sort of progression for me. And that's where, you know, my foundation of my catamaran sailing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So while we got you on here, we want to talk, you know, specifically how you get fast. So, you know, what makes you fast? And I thought, like, the first place to start, you know, pretty much there's not too many catamaran boats out there now that aren't at single or double trapeze now. So, you know, helming from the trapeze is a skill that that's obviously very paramount to making the boat go fast. And I want to get a picture of you here from the recent Hobie 16 Worlds. We'll pull up. This is you and your crew. I believe it's you can introduce him there. Who's that with you?
Worst News is his name. He goes by Worst News. He or Bradley to his let's say he's really good friends. But yeah, Bradley and I on the 16. I'm still in therapy trying to recover from that regatta, but hopefully I won't need my therapy and my medication for much longer.
So all kidding aside, though, I mean, watching, like, and I watch a whole lot of catamaran races, you can almost pick out really good sailors just by their form on the boat. When you see them sailing the boat, the attitude of the boat, the position they're on the boat. So maybe, you know, you can describe some of the key things that you look to accomplish when you're out on the wire.
Oh, you know, so it was pretty, at that regard, you know, it was pretty lumpy. Even when it wasn't very windy, it was pretty lumpy. So, well, you know, we're basically, you know, as low as you can go without getting knocked off. You know, thankfully, you know, with Worsty, he's pretty good at setting the trapeze heights up for the conditions, and it didn't take him and us long to figure out what height we needed to be to, you know, to clear the waves, but to be, obviously you want to be as low as possible, you know, for the leverage. I mean, I wouldn't say, I mean, I pretty much stand on my toes the whole time, and you know, you can see Worsty does as well. He's a bit shorter than me, but you know, clearly, my trapezing technique isn't the best in the world. Like, I don't stretch my back out and put my head right down flat. But I mean, I do what I can, I guess. I probably insist that my crews do a lot more hiking than I do. That's probably just because I'm a bit lazy when it comes to trapezing. But certainly, I stand on my toes, and it's key when it's lumpy like that to keep your crew weight, sort of semi together. Worsty's obviously, he's got the traveller and the jib sheet, and I just sort of bounce off him. I'm not very stable on the boat, probably because I put my feet reasonably close together, but I just bounce off my crew all the time. I think all my crews, my wife included, would testify to that I'm always rocking around and hip and shouldering and falling off the back a little bit and stuff, but I generally lean forward and just sort of bounce off them to keep me stable. That's it.
So a couple of things. Up on your toes, is that for gaining as much leverage as you can?
Yeah, sure. And especially when it's lumpy, it gives you a lot of suspension over the waves. You're not flat-footed then, so you can move around the boat. I find that sometimes you sail with people, that are very flat-footed and they sort of stand on, they really put their heels down. Then you find that they don't sort of move around, or they don't wear the suspension or the shock of the waves. Whereas on your toes, you can sort of move quickly and, sort of pivot and turn and all those sorts of things. So I think, being on your toes, is an important part of trapezing. Certainly when you see young kids, when they're going to be fast by the way that they trapeze. Like you say, you can see people that are fast by the way that they trapeze. Well, generally, when you see young kids that trapeze really well on the boat, who are super comfortable on their toes, that hike well, that they're going to be superstars in the future.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm thinking, like, I've also sailed the Hobie 16. I've done some F18 sailing. I would think the 16 is probably the trickier of the boats to trapeze off with a smaller rail.
Yeah. It and you probably, when it's choppy, you run out of room at the back of the boat pretty quickly because it's a bit shorter. But I think for me, because I've done so much sailing on a Hobie 16, I'm always pretty comfortable on it. The biggest problem for me when I jump from bigger boats to the F18, or when I was sailing the Tornado back onto the 16, was just how short they are. But the trapezing, it's not too bad. I always found it pretty comfortable. I think that's probably just because, I've sailed it for a long time.
Now, are you a proponent? I see quite often, especially when the waves get up, a lot of the helm are putting their back feet on the back of the hull. Do you do that much, or?
Yeah, look, I don't do it. If you watch photos of, I think, Brazilians and South Africans sailing uphill, they'll do it a bit. I've tried. I just find that my bottom foot or my back foot just gets hit by the waves, from time to time. So I'll go right to the back of the corner casting, but I don't go any further back than that. Upwind, yeah.
Now the other thing, on the Worlds, I don't know a lot of people are aware of, but those are brand new boats that you rotate through, so you really don't get to do a lot to them, and it almost looks like you got too much main sheet there. I guess sheet management is a big thing when you're out on the wire, also, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why you need a good crew, because obviously I've just doing the main sheet. The way that we run the boat on 16 is I do the main sheet, and then Worsty does the jib and everything else. And you can see like he just works out where the sheets have got to go and what's got to happen, and he manages it all. You can tuck them in, like thread the extra tail through the lacing and all that sort of stuff, but you're pretty time limited, so it's important to have a good crew that can manage all the ropes on the boat.
No, I mean, I guess it's a bit of an advantage too to have the helm being a little bit bigger than the crew, is that to be able to see over and.
Yeah, well, like that's what works for us. Obviously, at that regatta, I was probably about 76 kilos, and Worsty, he made up the rest to get us over minimum. But I'm 5'11" and a half sort of thing, which is short of 6 foot. So you know, just the way that the boats work out for us, you know, it'd be pretty unusual to find someone that was sort of 6 foot tall for me to sail with, just the way his weight goes. So, you know, Worsty's shorter than me, which is convenient for seeing over the top of him. But I've never had a problem with, you know, I just put my crews lower. If they're tall at the same height as me, they just go lower than me. So, yeah, it's never a drama.
And I'm just noticing Brad's here front foot here. Is that just for supporting him to, or is that getting more leverage on the rail, where he's got more foot on the rail, or is that from?
To be honest with you, this is the first time I've seen this photo, so that's just the way he does it. You know, everyone does it separate ways. It was pretty lumpy, you know, there, and you kind of had to do everything you could. Just, it wasn't, you know, falling off conditions, but it was lumpy, excess waves for the wind, basically. So the waves were bigger than the wind that was blowing, and it meant that, you know, in the lull, like in the troughs of the waves, there wasn't much wind at all, and you know, you had to really watch where the wind was coming from, and where the pressure was coming from, and where the waves were coming from, and what you were doing on the boat. Otherwise, you know, there was a high chance you get washed off the back just in the lulls. So, you know, you did whatever you could at that regatta to just stay on that last day. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't out of control, unsaleable, but it was definitely a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Now, you jumped right from winning the Hobie 16 Worlds, and if I recall correctly, when you got into an F18, it was basically you were very competitive in your first event there, and so was it a fairly easy transition going from the 16 to a bigger boat?
Oh, you know, like back then, you know, it was right at the first F18 Worlds in 2000, and the subsequent Worlds. You know, we were all learning a lot about the boats and the class. Obviously, the Tornado guys had a bit of an advantage, when they were switching from their boat, which was more similar, let's say, to an F18. But the F18 I found was pretty easy to sail compared to the 16. And, you know, the good thing about 16 is it teaches you how to start, and it teaches you how to, you know, really consolidate on the first upwind. And it's, you know, the boats are very similar speed, and you have to really strategically work out what you're going to do. And then, you know, stay in clear air, and, you know, they're difficult boats to tack. Whereas the F18, I found that back then, you know, there was an easy transition because I'd had such a tough upbringing in the 16 to sail that F18. It was pretty straightforward. I was not the fastest person around on the F18, but I could start reasonably well. I knew, you know, how to keep clean lanes, and I could make the boat go reasonably fast, even though I hadn't spent a lot of time on it. And I just built on that. And then luckily I found someone really good to sail with, who's Corey, who I used to sail with, you know, 20 years ago, who's still a good mate of mine and involved with sailing now. And, you know, obviously he's in Switzerland, so we don't sail together anymore, but we stay in touch. And we built on, you know, our friendship and our teamwork, and we just developed that way. So, but for me, yeah, it was always an easy transition. It's an easier transition going from a Hobie 16 to an F18 back. Every time I jump back from the F18 back on a Hobie 16, it takes me months and months to figure out what I'm doing. And probably that's why we sort of struggled at the Hobie 16 Worlds, because I didn't own a boat, and, you know, I didn't do as much sailing as I wanted to. But that's, you know, I learned from that, and hopefully next time I'll do a bit more training.
Now, I've also done an F18 Worlds and a Hobie 18 Worlds, not a 16. I've never been able to sail more in a 16, but to be honest with you, I found the starting tougher on a Hobie Worlds than an F18 World. Is that something you find yourself, or?
Yeah, I do find, yeah, the F18, you know, like it's still not easy. Nothing's easy. But just to get the boat off the start line of the F18 world, I think is a little easier. And the good thing about the F18 is that you've got options to tack. And, you know, when I used to coach Hobie 16s, I used to say to people, if you do more than 3 tacks on an upwind, on the first upwind, you're dead. Whereas on the F18, you can do 3 tacks in the first 100 meters and still no problems, you know what I mean? So the other good thing about F18 racing, you know, is that the courses do tend to be like pretty long. I do find that Hobie 16 sailing these days, because they're trying to, you know, do the round robins and get the races in fast, the courses aren't that long, and it makes it really tight, the length of the upwind. And it means that if you do get a bad start, your options are very, very limited. So it makes starting even more critical. Whereas the F18 course is double the length. And even though that we might have, you know, 80 or 100 boats or 120 boats all on one course or one start line, I think that the courses are a good length for the length of the races, but also to give you options. So if you do get a bit of a crappy start, you can bail out, find a clean lane and come back. Whereas the Hobie 16 racing, yeah, seems to be condensed a little bit lately. And I understand that they're trying to run the races quickly and, you know, get everyone on the boats, especially, you know, right up into the finals, and run as many races as they can. But it doesn't leave you many options. And if you start poorly in a 16 worlds, yeah, you're dog meat.
So we got some video of you here on an F18, and maybe we'll get you to critique yourself a bit here. I believe this is from your home yacht club in Western Australia, and this is you going upwind on your F18. So maybe we'll talk about, you know, how you're sailing the boat, and I'll let you take a look at it here.
Oh, it's a bit.
The one thing we're noticing right off the bat here is, you know, that I don't know who's crewing with you there. Hopefully you would know who that is, but, you know, both very low on the trapeze. It looks like you're keeping, you know, the boat at a fairly equal attitude. It's not flying a hull or squatting too low, and it looks like really gusty conditions. So that must be really tricky to sail that in that.
Yeah. Look, you know, so we race on the Swan River in Perth, and, you know, it's a pretty confined bit of water, but it's, it can get a bit gusty and a bit shifty, but I love sailing on the river. It's a really challenging spot to sail. You know, the ley lines are generally curved, so there's no sort of just, you know, go to the ley line tack and you end up at the top mark. You know, there's quite often you can tack way under the ley line and end up at the mark, or vice versa. And there's different places of shift and chop and flat water and all sorts of things. So it's a pretty, you know, fun, challenging place to sail. This is us at the Cat Classic. I think this is it's Kai and I, who's my current crew, and you know, he's a young bloke. He's a boat builder apprentice extraordinaire. He works with carbon up here in Perth, so he's super enthusiastic, and he and I have been sailing together a couple of years now. That's our old boat, actually. We've only just got a brand new one, which has just been delivered, you know, from Poland, from Exploiter. That regatta was in September. So yeah, we were just trying to keep the hull, you know, just out of the water. He does the main sheet on the F18 going upwind. Whereas on the, you know, obviously on the 16, I do the main sheet, but on the F18, he does the main sheet. He pretty much runs everything. All I do is hang on and steer uphill. And he, you know, literally, you know, pulls all the strings, and we just sort of discuss things. But as always with, you know, with sailing, the better you get, you know, cohesive as a team, the less you talk about how to make the boat go, and the more you just talk about what's happening on the race course. And luckily, Kai and I these days are pretty much at that. We don't really say much at all to each other about making the boat go. We just discuss what the plan is.
Now, so you're obviously steering. He's working the sheet. Are you? Is he calling like gusts coming, or is there much of that communication? Pressure on how long it's going to be?
You know, I reckon it's easier for me to just tell him, because I've pretty much got my head out of the boat all the time, and as does he. He sort of looks at the pressure on us, you know, in the short term, whereas I kind of tend to look way up the track and look at the pressure coming like right up the course. But if there's a big pressure change, like, you know, let's say 15 to 5 knots or 18 to 10 knots, and we'll have to adjust downhaul or go in off the trapeze or something like that, then I'll call it to him so he knows that we're going to need downhaul off, or, you know, to go in off the trapeze or something to grunt the boat up, or vice versa. If it goes from 8 knots to 15 knots, like, I'll say to him, you know, it's going to be a big pressure gain, or big pressure increase, and we're going to need downhaul or something, just to give him a heads up, because these boats, you know, like the Tornado, they're pretty physical on the cruise. You know, with me, Kai, he does the main sheet upwind, then he pulls the kite up, you know, he trims the spinnaker the whole way down, and all I do is cleat the main pretty much downwind, and then he drops it, and then he's got to work out the boards, the rotation, the downhaul, the kite, everything basically is his job. So you've got to be pretty fit, and luckily he's only a young bloke, you know, so he can party all night and sail all day.
So let's take a look at you're going into a tack here. Maybe you can discuss some of the key things, components that go into doing a really good tack on a catamaran here. Here you're going into it initially.
Sure. Well, you know, like on the F18, and especially exploders, they tack. I've got so much buoyancy. You know, the Scorpion, it's got so much buoyancy in it. You know, you don't have to worry about it stopping through the tack. You can, you know, like, you can round up and it'll glide head to wind for a long time because the amount of buoyancy that's in the boat. So obviously with the F18, you know, the crew's got to go around the front. So he goes between the mast and the jib and stands up. So we just basically, we call it, we run the boards asymmetrically as well. I don't know if you see that in the video where I will say we're tacking, and like I do on the 16, I put the main sheet in my tiller hand, and yeah, I hold it up pretty high just to keep the main sheet on. And then as I come, start steering the boat head to wind, Kai will come in, push the new leeward board down, so the old windward board will go down to whatever setting that we want. And then he'll come in, go through the gap between the mast and the jib, and, you know, I'll round the boat up. And at the same time, obviously, the sail's just getting eased slightly. And then, you know, I just, you know, at that point on an F18 these days, I just cleat the main. I've eased it a little bit, but I just cleat it, and then I just steer the boat flat out of attack. So the main is still on. And to stop the boat, you know, from capsizing, I just steer the boat flat. And then literally I just leave it in the cleat. And then while this is all happening, I come out to the other side, you know, hook up on the trapeze, I take a big wrap on the main sheet. And then as I jump out, I sheet on all at the same time. Kai, you know, he'll come around the mast here. He'll grab the windward board, hopefully, in the video. Take a heap of, yank the windward board up, and then he'll go out the trapeze, and then off we go. When I'm a bit unfit, though, which happens from time to time, especially at the moment, because I haven't been doing much sailing because we've only just got the boat, I tend to hand him the main sheet before I go out. That's only because I'm lazy and I'm a bit unfit at the moment.
I notice on that tack, just going back, you came in standing up. Is that typically how you like to come in off the wire, standing up?
You know, I do it more and more these days. It saves my knees, I think, and you can just. It means that you come off the trapeze really easily, as opposed to if you come off the trapeze and you go onto your knees. One, it hurts your knees. Two, the trapeze hook doesn't come off your hook easily, and then I find myself in the middle of the boat, stuck basically with the old trapeze still hooked up. Whereas I find if I just lift myself up, it just falls off. So but it's one of those things where you've got to be in practice to do it, and if you're not in practice, it's hard to get your head around. But when you do it, it works really well.